Immersed in deep sleep, his wife breathed evenly and clearly. It seemed that at any moment a faint smile or a whispered word might slip from her half-open lips. Beneath the blanket, her young, full chest rose and fell in peaceful rhythm. Dawn filtered through the windows, but the light of the winter morning was meager. A dim twilight hovered uncertainly over the sleeping objects, softly outlining their contours. Ferdinand rose quietly. He himself did not know why. It happened to him more and more often. Abandoning his work, he would suddenly grab his hat and rush out of the house, into the fields, running faster and faster until he found himself somewhere unfamiliar, exhausted, his knees trembling, his pulse pounding in his temples. Or, in the midst of a lively conversation, he would fall silent, losing the thread, failing to respond, struggling to shake off a strange numbness. Or in the evening, while undressing, he would drift off and sit on the edge of the bed, a shoe clenched tightly in his hand, until his wife's voice or the dull thud of the fallen shoe brought him back to reality. He shivered as he stepped from the warm room onto the balcony. Instinctively, he pressed his elbows to his sides. Below stretched a wide landscape, still wrapped in mist. Lake Zurich, usually gleaming like a mirror, reflecting every drifting cloud, was now veiled in a thick, milky shroud. Wherever his gaze fell, wherever his hands reached, everything seemed damp, gloomy, slippery gray. Droplets slid from the trees, moisture seeped down the pilings. The waking world resembled a man just pulled from water, shaking off its spray. Voices reached him through the fog, muffled and hollow, like the dying gasp of a drowning man. Now and then came the clang of a hammer and the distant toll of a bell, but the usually clear sound was now rusty and indistinct. Darkness and dampness hung between him and the world. He was chilled, yet he remained standing, thrusting his hands deeper into his pockets, waiting for the horizon to clear. Like a curtain of gray paper slowly rolling upward, the fog began to lift. An indescribable longing seized him to see again the beloved landscape, lying motionless below, now cloaked in morning haze. Its crisp outlines, when bathed in light, always soothed his soul. How often the joyful expanse of the horizon had calmed his anxiety. The cottages on the far shore, nestled close together, the steamer gracefully slicing through blue waves, the gulls merrily flitting from bank to bank, the smoke spiraling silver from a red chimney toward the midday chime. All of it had always assured him, peace, peace. And despite the madness of the universe, he believed in these beautiful signs and, for fleeting moments, forgot his true homeland, gazing upon this newly found one. Months had passed since he fled from modernity and mankind, from a country engulfed in war, to this place, Switzerland. He felt how his soul, torn, wounded, crushed by pain and horror, was finding rest and healing here. He sensed how the gentle landscape beckoned him, how its pure lines and colors called the artist back to his work. That was why, when the landscape vanished from view, when, as on this morning, it was obscured by fog, he again felt foreign and alone. A boundless compassion rose in him for all those trapped below, in the gloom, for the people of his homeland, also lost in a misty distance, an endless compassion, an endless yearning to merge with them and their fate. From the fog, on this March morning, came 4 strokes of the church bell, and then, announcing the hour to itself, 8 more, clearer and brighter. and he felt as though lifted to the belfry, unbearably alone. Before him stretched the world, and behind him, wrapped in the twilight of sleep, lay his wife. With every fiber of his being, he longed to pierce the soft veil of fog, to catch even the faintest sign of awakening life. As he stared intently downward, it seemed to him that in the gray haze, where the village ended and the road began its short, winding ascent into the hills, something was slowly moving. A tiny, barely discernible figure approached, not quite human, not quite beast. Its presence filled him with a quiet joy. Someone else was awake. And with that joy came a sharp, almost painful curiosity. At the crossroads, where one path led to a neighboring village and the other climbed toward his own, a gray silhouette emerged. For a moment it stood still, as if resting, then began to ascend the hill at a measured pace. Ferdinand felt a sudden unease. Who was this stranger, he wondered. What force drove him out into this morning from the warmth and half-light of his room, just as it did me? Is he coming here? And what does he want? Now that the fog had thinned slightly, he recognized the figure. It was the postman. Every morning, precisely at 8, when the church bells rang, he made his way up the hill. Ferdinand knew his unmoving face, framed by a reddish, slightly graying sailor's beard and blue-tinted glasses. His name was Nussbaum, but Ferdinand had nicknamed him the Nutcracker for his stiff, wooden gait and the pompous manner in which he swung his large black leather satchel onto his right shoulder, handing out letters with near-theatrical solemnity. Ferdinand smiled involuntarily, watching the postman trudge uphill, the bag now slung over his left shoulder, try to lend dignity to his small, deliberate steps. But suddenly his knees trembled. The hand he had raised to his eyes dropped, as if no longer his own. The anxiety, today's, yesterday's, the lingering unrest of recent weeks, gripped him with renewed force. It seemed to him that this man was coming straight toward him, step by step, with unwavering purpose. Without thinking, he pressed down the door handle, slipped past his sleeping wife, and hurried down the stairs. He rushed along the path beside the fence, heading directly toward the postman. They met at the garden gate. Do you have anything for me?" The postman lifted his fogged-up glasses. Yes. With a practiced motion, he swung the satchel to his right side and began sorting through the bundle of letters with fingers red and damp from the morning chill. Fingers that looked like earthworms. Ferdinand trembled. At last, the postman pulled out a letter, a large brown envelope marked official in bold type at the top, with Ferdinand's name printed below. "Sign here," the postman said, moistening the tip of his ink pencil and offering the ledger. Ferdinand, his hand unsteady, scribbled an illegible signature in a single stroke. He grabbed the letter from the postman's thick, red hand, but his fingers had gone numb, and the envelope slipped, falling onto the wet ground, into the damp leaves. As he bent to retrieve it, he inhaled the bitter scent of rot and decay. Now he understood clearly. This was it, this letter that had lain in wait deep within his consciousness, disturbing his peace for weeks. It had come from some meaningless, amorphous distance, found him with its dry, mechanical type, burst into his warm, full life, and now laid claim to his freedom. He had sensed its approach, like a scout in the forest feels the invisible, icy muzzle aimed at him, hiding a tiny piece of lead that longs to pierce living flesh. So it had all been in vain. His resistance, the innocent tricks with which he exhausted his mind night after night. Now they had caught up with him. It had been less than 8 months since he had stood, naked and shivering from cold and disgust, before a military doctor who prodded his muscles like a livestock dealer at a fair. In that humiliation, he had felt the full baseness of modernity, the slavery into which Europe had sunk. For the first 2 months, he could still endure life in the suffocating atmosphere of patriotic slogans. But then it became unbearable. When people spoke, he saw the film of falsehood on their tongues. Listening to their speeches was torment. The sight of women, trembling from the cold, sitting at dawn with empty sacks on the market steps, tore at his heart. He wandered with clenched fists, feeling himself grow bitter, intolerant, repulsive even to himself in his powerless rage. Finally, through a connection, he managed to escape with his wife to Switzerland. When he crossed the border, blood rushed to his head, his legs gave way, and he had to lean against a post. He felt human again, alive, active, free, his chest filled with the air of liberty. His homeland now meant only prison and violence. Foreign soil, Europe, had become his true country. But the joy of relief was short-lived. Fear crept back into his soul. He felt that even his name had been drawn into the bloody vortex, that something unknown and alien knew of him and would not let go. He sensed a cold, watchful eye fixed on him from some unseen space. He withdrew, turned inward, stopped reading newspapers, afraid of stumbling upon a summons. He changed apartments to erase his trail, asked for letters to be addressed to his wife, and held at the post office, avoided people to escape their questions. He didn't go into town, sending his wife instead for canvases and paints. His existence dissolved into obscurity in a small village by Lake Zurich, where he rented a modest cottage from local farmers. But he knew, among hundreds of thousands of sheets in one of those drawers lay the one, the very one. And he knew, someday, somewhere, someone would open that drawer. He heard it being unlocked, heard the clatter of the typewriter striking his name, and knew the letter would be sent, would travel, until it found him. And now it was here, cold, tangible, rustling between his fingers. Ferdinand tried to remain calm. "What is this piece of paper to me?" he told himself. "Tomorrow, the day after, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of leaves will bloom on the bushes, and each one will mean no more to me than this. What does official mean? That I'm obliged to read it? I don't serve. I have no superior. What does my name mean here? Is it really me? Who can force me to admit that it is? Who can command me to read what's written here? If I tear this letter without reading it, its scraps will scatter in the wind all the way to the lake, and I'll know nothing of it, and the world will know nothing of me. Not a single drop will fall to the earth faster. My breath won't change by a fraction. What could possibly disturb me? A sheet of paper I know only as much about as I choose to know, and I choose not to know. I want nothing but freedom." His fingers longed to destroy the stiff envelope, to tear it to shreds. But strangely, his muscles refused to obey. His hands resisted his will, refused to comply. And in the very moment his soul commanded him to rip it apart, his trembling fingers slowly opened it. And there it was, what he already knew, number 34.729F. By order of the district commander in M, you are requested to appear no later than March 22nd at the district headquarters for re-examination and determination of your fitness for military service. Military papers will be issued to you by the consulate in Zurich, where you are to report for collection. An hour later, when he returned to the room, his wife greeted him with a cheerful smile and a bundle of spring flowers in her hands. Her face radiated carefree joy. "Look," she said, "what I found. Out in the meadow behind the house, they're already blooming. And in the shade between the trees, there's still snow." Not wanting to hurt her, he took the flowers and buried his face in them, so he wouldn't have to meet her clear, serene gaze. Then he quickly retreated to the attic, which served as a studio. But the work wouldn't come. As soon as he placed a blank canvas before him, the mechanical lines of the letter began to surface on it. The paints on the palette looked like filth and blood. His thoughts filled with images of festering wounds. On his own portrait, standing in the shadows, he saw himself in a military collar pressing against his chin. "Madness, madness," he muttered aloud and stamped his foot, trying to banish the vision. But his hands trembled, and the floor beneath him seemed to sway. He lay down, then sat for a long time on the bench, sunk in heavy thoughts, until his wife called him to lunch. He choked on every bite. Bitterness rose to his throat. He tried to swallow it, but it kept returning. He sat with his head bowed, silent, but noticed that his wife was watching him. Suddenly, he felt the light touch of her hand. "What's wrong, Ferdinand?" He said nothing. "Bad news." He nodded. "Military service?" He nodded again. They both fell silent. A heavy, oppressive thought hung over them, eclipsing everything around. It clung to the half-eaten dishes, crawled like a wet snail across the nape of their necks, sending shivers. They didn't dare look at each other, sitting hunched, crushed by an unbearable weight. Her voice cracked slightly when she finally asked, "They're sending you to the consulate?" "Yes." "And you'll go?" He flinched. "I don't know, but I suppose I must." "Why must?" "Why? In Switzerland, they have no power over you. You're free here." He hissed through clenched teeth. "Free? Who is free now? Anyone who wants to be free. And you, more than anyone. What is this paper?" She pushed the sheet aside with contempt. "What power does this scrap of paper, written by some miserable clerk, have over you, a thinking, free man? What can it do to you? Maybe not the paper, but the one who sent it. Who sent it? Who is he? A machine. A vast machine built for killing. But it won't seize you. It's already seized millions. Why shouldn't it seize me too? Because you don't want it to. The others didn't want it either. But they weren't free. They stood under crossfire and went because they had no choice. No one went willingly. No one from Switzerland would return to that hell." She held back her emotion, seeing how he suffered. A wave of compassion, like for a child, swept over her. "Ferdinand," she said, pressing close to him, "try to think it through calmly. You're frightened, and I understand how easy it is to lose yourself when that cunning beast pounces. Think, we were expecting the letter. We knew it might come. I was proud of you because I knew you'd tear it to shreds and refuse to kill. Don't you remember?" "I remember, Paula. I do, but—" "Don't answer now," she insisted. "You're under their influence. Remember our conversations, the draft you wrote. It's in the left drawer. You said you'd never take up a weapon. You made a decision." He flared up. "It was never final. I was never sure. All of it. Lies, cowardly silence. I drowned my fear in words. It was all while I was still free. But even then I knew, if they summoned me, I'd go. You think I tremble before them? No, they're nothing until they enter your flesh and blood. They're air, sound, emptiness. I trembled before myself. I knew, the moment they call me, I'll go." "Ferdinand, do you want to go?" "No, no, no," he stamped his foot. "I don't want to. Everything in me rebels against it, but I'll go against my will. That's the horror of their power. You serve them unwillingly against your convictions." If only one could preserve one's will. But when you hold that paper, your will is paralyzed. You obey. You become a schoolboy. They call your name. You stand up and tremble. But who calls you? The homeland? A clerk? A board office worker? Even the state has no right to compel murder. None. I know. I know it all. You can quote Tolstoy. I know every argument. Don't you see? I don't believe they have the right to summon me. I'm not obliged to go. I have one duty, to be human, to work. I have no homeland outside of humanity. No desire to kill. I understand everything, Paula. I see it all as clearly as you do. But I'm already in their grasp. They've summoned me. And I know, no matter what, why, tell me why. He groaned. I don't know. Maybe because I'm no hero and I'm afraid to run. It's impossible to explain. There's a kind of compulsion. I can't break the chain that strangles 20 million people. I just can't. He covered his face with his hands. Above him, the pendulum swung with steady precision, like a sentry before the guardhouse of time. She shuddered. They're calling you. I understand that, but I still can't accept it. Don't you hear the call here, too? Isn't there anything here that holds you back? He stirred. My paintings? My work? No, I can't paint. I realize that today. In my mind, I'm already there among them. To create for oneself while the world collapses, that's a crime. Now is not the time to live only for oneself. She stood up and turned away. I never thought you lived only for yourself. I believed that I meant something to you. Her voice trembled, tears audible in its tone. Ferdinand wanted to comfort her, but through the tears in her eyes, a flash of anger appeared. He stepped back. Go, she said. Go. What am I to you? Less than that scrap of paper. Go if you must. I don't want to, he shouted, slamming his fist on the table in helpless rage. It's not me, it's them. They're strong, and I'm weak. Their will has been forged over centuries. They're organized. They've planned everything down to the last detail, and it's fallen on us like lightning from a clear sky. They have will. I have nerves. It's an unequal fight. You can't resist a machine. If they were people, you could fight back. But this is a machine, a soulless mechanism, a slaughtering tool, without heart, without mind. You can't fight it. You can if you must. She cried out in desperation. I can if you can't. If you're weak, I'm not. I won't surrender to this absurdity. I won't give up a living man for a piece of paper. You won't go, as long as I have any power over you. You're ill, I'm sure of it. You're all nerves. You flinch at the sound of clinking dishes. Any doctor would see it. Let them examine you here. I'll go with you. I'll explain everything. They'll release you. You have to resist, summon your will, grit your teeth. Remember Jeanette, your friend in Paris. He spent 3 months under observation in a psychiatric clinic. They tormented him, tested him, but he endured, and they let him go. You just have to show that you don't want to go. You mustn't give in. This isn't about trifles. They're threatening your life, your freedom, everything. You have to fight, to resist. How? They're stronger than anyone. They're the strongest in the world. That's not true. They're strong only because the world allows it. A human being is stronger than any abstraction if he remains true to himself and his will. He must have a sense of dignity that he strives to preserve. Then the words that now intoxicate people, homeland, duty, heroism, will become hollow sounds that reek of blood. Be honest. Is your country dearer to you than your life? Is a province that's changed its monarch as precious to you as your right hand, the one you paint with? Do you believe in justice other than the one we create ourselves, with blood and spirit? No, I know you don't. You'll be lying to yourself if you decide to go. But I don't want to. That's not the point. You simply don't know how to want. They make you want, and that's your fault. You sacrifice yourself to something you despise. Wouldn't it be better to give yourself to something worthier? To shed your blood for your own idea, I understand that. But for someone else's? Ferdinand, don't forget, if you have the will to remain free, they'll seem like nothing but spiteful fools. But if you don't want to, and they seize you, you'll be the fool. You told me that yourself. Yes, I said it. I said it. I babbled to encourage myself, like children singing in a dark forest to drown out their fear. It was all a lie. I see that now with terrifying clarity. I always knew, if they summoned me, I would go. You'll go? Ferdinand, Ferdinand. No, it's not me going. Not me. Something inside me has already decided. Something rises in me, like a schoolboy before his teacher. I tremble and obey. And at the same time, I hear everything you say, and I know, you're right. It's humane, it's necessary. It's the only thing I should do. I understand that. I know that going there is vile. And yet I go. Something pushes me. You may despise me. I despise myself. But I can't help it. I can't. He pounded the table with his fists. There was something dull, animal-like in his gaze. She was afraid to look at him, afraid that love might turn into contempt. On the table lay meat, cold as carrion, and bread, black, crushed like refuse. The heavy smell of food filled the room. She was overcome with disgust for everything. She flung open the window. Fresh air rushed in. Above her trembling shoulders stretched the blue March sky, and white clouds drifted slowly above her hair. Look, she began again, more calmly now, look out at the distance. Just once, I beg you. Maybe everything I say isn't entirely precise. Words don't always hit their mark. But what I see, that is truth. It's not a lie. Down there, in the valley, a farmer walks behind his plow. He's young, he's strong. Why isn't he allowing himself to be killed? Because his country isn't at war. Because his field lies just 6 strips beyond the border, and the law of that land doesn't reach him. You're standing in that same strip now, and that law doesn't reach you either. Can a law be, just if it works, only up to a certain invisible line, and beyond that it's powerless? Don't you feel its absurdity looking at this world? Ferdinand, look how clear the sky is above the lake, how the colors call out to delight the eye. Come to the window and tell me again that you want to go. I don't want to. You know that. Why should I look at all this? I understand it all of it. You're tormenting me. Every word you speak hurts. And nothing can help me. She felt how his suffering was weakening her resolve. Compassion was eroding her strength. She turned to him quietly. And Ferdinand, when are you supposed to report to the consulate? Tomorrow. Actually, I was meant to go yesterday, but the letter was delayed. They only found me today. Tomorrow I have to go. And what if you don't go tomorrow? Let them wait. They can't do anything to you here. There's no need to rush. Let them wait a week. I'll say you're ill, Ferdinand. My brother did the same, and gained 2 weeks. Worst case, they won't believe it and send a doctor. Maybe we can reason with him. People without uniforms seem more human. If he sees your paintings, maybe he'll understand you don't belong at the front. And even if that doesn't work, we'll still have one a week. He remained silent, and in that silence, she felt his inner resistance. Ferdinand, promise me you won't go tomorrow. Let them wait. You need time to gather yourself. Right now you're shaken, and they could do anything they want with you. Tomorrow they'll be stronger than you. But in a week, maybe you'll be stronger than them. Think of the beautiful days we could spend together. Ferdinand, do you hear me? She tugged at his sleeve. His empty pupils stared at her, But the meaning of her words didn't register in that frozen gaze. Only sorrow and fear, rising from deep within, were reflected there. Slowly, he began to come back to himself. "You're right," he said at last. "You're right. There's no rush. What can they do to me? You're right. I won't go tomorrow, or the day after. You're right. I might not have received the letter. I might have been out walking. I might have fallen ill. Though, I did sign for it. But that means nothing. You're right. I need to collect my thoughts. You're right." He stood up and began pacing the room. "You're right. You're right," he repeated mechanically, but there was no conviction in his voice. "You're right. You're right," he murmured, distracted and hollow. She knew his thoughts were already far away, beyond the line, in that fatal space. She could no longer bear to hear those "you're rights" spoken only by his lips. Quietly, she left the room, and for a long time she could still hear his steady footsteps, like the steps of a prisoner in a cell. That evening, he again didn't touch his food. Something in him had gone rigid, distant. Only at night, lying beside him, did she feel the full force of his fear. He clung to her soft, warm body as if seeking refuge, held her tightly and tremulously. But she understood it wasn't love. It was a plea for salvation. In his kisses, she felt convulsive tears, bitter and salty. He lay silent. Sometimes he moaned. Then she would reach out her hand, and he would grasp it, as if she could hold him here. They didn't speak a word. Only when she noticed his tears did she try to comfort him. "You still have a whole week ahead. Don't think about it." But she felt ashamed for suggesting he think of something else. His cold hands, the uneven beat of his heart. Everything told her that one thought had taken hold of him completely, and there was no miracle that could free him from it. Never before had silence and darkness felt so oppressive in this house. Cold and dread, like condensed suffering of the world, had settled into the walls. Only the clock continued its imperturbable march, like a steel sentry, step by step, and she felt, with each passing second, the man lying beside her, alive and beloved, drifting away into an invisible distance. She could bear it no longer. She jumped up and stopped the pendulum. Time retreated. Only fear and silence remained. And the two of them, side by side, yet each enclosed in their own silence, remained awake until dawn. One single thought haunted them both, refusing to let go. The morning still carried the gloom of winter. Frost lay heavy over the lake when he rose, hastily threw on his clothes, and began pacing from room to room with hesitant, uncertain steps. Suddenly, he grabbed his coat and hat, quietly opened the front door. Later, he would often recall how his hand trembled as it touched the cold latch, and how he glanced back in embarrassment, wondering if anyone had seen him. And indeed, the dog leapt at him like a stranger, but recognizing him, pressed close with joy, wagging its tail and begging for a walk. He waved it off. He couldn't bring himself to speak. Without realizing the urgency in his movements, he rushed down the path. For a moment he stopped, looked back at the house, already fading into the mist. But some unknown force pulled him forward. He ran, stumbling over stones as if someone were chasing him. He stopped only at the station, breathless, his clothes damp with sweat, beads of it glistening on his forehead. On the platform stood a few peasants and townsfolk. Recognizing him, they nodded, clearly willing to strike up a conversation, but he avoided them. The thought of speaking to anyone filled him with dread. Yet the weight on the wet platform brought him a painful sense of emptiness. Not knowing what to do, he stepped on a scale, dropped a coin, saw his pale, sweaty face in the little mirror above the dial, and only after stepping off and hearing the coin clink in the machine did he realize he hadn't even looked at the needle. "I'm losing my mind, completely losing it," he muttered. A horror of himself gripped him. He sat on a bench, trying to force himself to think. But then came the whistle of the train. It roared in, and he rushed into a compartment. A dirty newspaper lay on the floor. He picked it up, stared at the page, unable to understand a single word, watching only how his hands trembled more and more. The train stopped. Zurich. He staggered out of the carriage. He knew where he was headed, and felt his resistance slowly ebbing. He tried to test himself, stopped before a poster, read it from top to bottom, just to prove he could still control himself. "I'm not in a hurry," he whispered, but the words hadn't even left his lips before he was already rushing forward. Inside him, a burning agitation pulsed, driving him onward in jolts. Helplessly scanning for a car, he spotted one, waved it down, and threw himself into the soft cushions like a man diving into water. He gave the address of the consulate. The car rumbled to life. He leaned back, closed his eyes. It felt as though he were plunging into an abyss, and at the same time, he relished the swift surrender to fate. He liked the passivity, the submission. The car stopped. He jumped out, paid, entered the elevator, once again feeling the blissful sensation of mechanical movement and ascent, as if everything happening was not driven by his own will, but by some unknown, invisible, powerful force pushing him forward. The consulate door was closed. He rang the bell. No answer. A fierce desire seized him, to turn back, to flee, to run down the stairs. But he rang again. Footsteps approached. The attendant fiddled with the lock for a long time and finally appeared, without a jacket, holding a dusty rag. Apparently, he'd been cleaning the office. "What do you want?" he asked sharply. "At the consulate. I have an appointment," Ferdinand stammered. Shame engulfed him again, burning from within. The attendant turned away with irritation and obvious rudeness. "Couldn't you read the notice downstairs on the board? Reception from 10 to 12? There's no one here now." And without waiting for a reply, he slammed the door with a dull thud. Ferdinand stood there hollowed out, his soul flooded with immeasurable shame. He looked at his watch. It was 10 minutes past 7. "I've gone mad, completely mad," he murmured, and with trembling legs, like a feeble old man, slowly descended the stairs. 2.5 hours, a dead stretch of time that felt unbearable. He sensed his composure slipping away with each passing minute. Just moments ago, he had been focused, collected. Every phrase had been carefully arranged, the entire scene mentally rehearsed. And now, between him and his readiness, a 2-hour iron curtain had descended. With dread, he noticed how his resolve was fading, how the words in his mind grew dim, collided, tangled, and vanished without a trace. He had envisioned everything clearly. He would enter the consulate, asked to be announced to the military affairs officer, with whom he was vaguely acquainted. They had once crossed paths and exchanged a few indifferent words. But Ferdinand had sized him up, an aristocrat, elegant, urbane, proud of his courtesy, fond of playing the magnanimous gentleman, eager not to appear like a bureaucrat. That kind of ambition was common among men like him. They wanted to seem like diplomats, independent minds. Ferdinand intended to play precisely that string. He imagined beginning with a casual tone, inquiring about the officer's wife, chatting about general matters. The officer would likely invite him to sit, offer a cigarette, and eventually ask, "How can I be of service?" That question was crucial. Then Ferdinand would reply calmly, indifferently. I received a notice inviting me to report to M for a medical examination. I believe it's a mistake. I've already been examined and declared unfit for service. He would say it with complete detachment, so it would be clear he regarded the matter as trivial. The officer, whose reserved manner Ferdinand knew well, would take the paper, explain that it was a re-examination, that it had been announced in the papers, and that all previously exempted individuals were now required to appear. To this, Ferdinand would shrug and say, "Ah, I don't read newspapers, no time. Work." From this, the officer would understand how little the war meant to him, how independent and free he was. Naturally, the officer would explain that he was obliged to comply with the summons, that he regretted it, but the military department, and so on. That would be the moment for Ferdinand to express his resolve. "I understand," he would say, "but I cannot interrupt my work. I've agreed to organize an exhibition of my paintings, and I cannot let someone down. I gave my word." He expected the officer would either extend the deadline or allow him to be examined locally. Up to that point, everything had seemed perfectly clear, but now doubts began to creep in. The officer might simply agree, and then time would be gained. But if he, with that cold, evasive, and suddenly bureaucratic politeness, began to explain that it was beyond his authority, then Ferdinand would have to stand up, approach the desk, and say firmly, with full conviction, "I acknowledge the summons, but I request that it be officially recorded that, for financial reasons, I am unable to report at this time and will postpone my appearance, at my own risk, for 3 weeks, until I fulfill my moral obligation. Naturally, I do not for a moment intend to shirk my duty to my country." He was particularly proud of these carefully crafted phrases, officially recorded, financial reasons. They sounded professional, administrative. If the officer brought up legal consequences, he could conclude even more decisively, "I am fully aware of the law and its implications, but the word I've given is my highest law, and to honor it, I am prepared to face any difficulty." Then he would take his leave swiftly in the conversation and head for the exit. "I must show that I'm not a tradesman or a boy waiting for instructions, but a man who knows when a conversation is over." He rehearsed the scene 3 times, pacing back and forth. The structure, the tone, he liked it immensely. He awaited the appointed hour like an actor waiting for his cue. Only one phrase gave him pause. "I do not for a moment intend to shirk my duty to my country." He needed a patriotic formulation to show he wasn't evading, but also wasn't eager. He acknowledged the necessity, before them, not before himself. Duty to my country, too literary, worn out. He considered, maybe I know my country needs me. No, that sounded absurd. I did not intend to disregard my country's call. Better, but still too servile, like a bow too deep. He thought again. Better simply, I know my duty. Yes, that was clear, universal. He could say it with conviction. I knew my duty, almost like a challenge. Now everything was ready. He glanced nervously at the clock. Time seemed frozen. It was only 8 o'clock. He wandered the streets, not knowing where to put himself. He stepped into a cafe and tried to read the newspaper. But the words got in the way. Again and again, homeland and duty surfaced. Those phrases disrupted the carefully constructed plan he had rehearsed. He drank a glass of cognac, then another, to soothe the bitterness in his throat. Desperately, he tried to think of ways to kill time and once more began piecing together the imagined conversation ahead. Suddenly, he touched his cheek. Unshaven. I'm unshaven, he thought with irritation. He rushed to the barber across the street, had his hair washed and trimmed, It took another half hour. Then it occurred to him. He had to look elegant. That mattered. They treated the poor with condescension, pounced on them. But if one arrived polished, carefree, in a flawless suit, they spoke in a different tone. The thought nearly intoxicated him. He sent his coat to be cleaned, bought gloves. He deliberated. Yellow, too flashy, too dandyish. Light gray. Yes, that might strike the right impression. He resumed walking. In front of the tailor's mirror, he adjusted his tie, gave himself a once-over. His hands were empty, and then it struck him to buy a cane. It would lend the visit an air of casualness, of light indifference. He hurried off and chose a refined walking stick. When he stepped out of the shop, the tower clock struck 9:15. He repeated his lesson once more. Perfect. The new phrasing, "I know my duty," seemed the strongest line. With confident, firm steps, he headed toward the consulate and bounded up the stairs with a boyish ease. But within a minute, as soon as the attendant opened the door, a sudden fear seized him. What if the entire plan was flawed? Nothing was as he had expected. When he asked for the official, the attendant replied that the secretary was busy and he'd have to wait. He pointed, not too politely, to a chair in a row where 3 others already sat, their faces marked with worry. Reluctantly, Ferdinand sat down and felt, with irritation, that here he was just a case, a file, a thing. The others shared their petty misfortunes. One, with a broken, tearful voice, spoke of having been interned in France for 2 years and now being denied money to return home. Another complained he couldn't find work and had 3 children waiting at home. Ferdinand shuddered with anger. He'd been placed on the bench of supplicants. He noticed how the defeated yet irritable tone of these men grated on his nerves. He tried to run through his planned conversation again, but the foolish chatter made it impossible to concentrate. More than anything, he wanted to shout, "Silence, you rabble," or pull out money and send them home. But his will was paralyzed, and he sat among them, hat in hand, just like the rest. The constant movement unsettled him. People coming and going, doors opening and closing. He feared someone he knew might see him here, among the petitioners. Each time the door opened, he jumped up, ready to leave, and sat back down, disappointed. It became increasingly clear. He had to leave, escape, before the last reserves of energy drained away. At last, he gathered himself and said to the attendant standing nearby like a sentry, "I'll come back tomorrow." But the attendant reassured him. The secretary will be free shortly. And Ferdinand felt his knees tremble again. He was trapped, and resistance was no longer possible. Finally, the rustle of a dress was heard. A coquettish lady passed by, smiling and casting a glance of superiority over the room. The attendant announced loudly, "The secretary will see you now." Ferdinand stood. Too late. He realized he'd left his cane and gloves on the windowsill, but it was too late to retrieve them. The door opened, and, distracted by outward thoughts, with a half-glance behind him, he stepped inside. The official sat at his desk, reading. He glanced at Ferdinand briefly, nodded without inviting him to sit, and smiled with cold politeness. "Ah, our Magister Artium. Just a moment," exclaimed the official, springing to his feet and calling into the adjoining room. "Please, the Ferdinand R. file, executed 3 days ago. You remember, the summons order." Then, settling back into his chair, he continued, "So you're leaving us? I hope your stay in Switzerland was pleasant. You look splendid." He flipped through the folder handed to him by the clerk and said, "Summons to him. Yes, all in order. Everything's been arranged. I've already instructed them to prepare the documents. I assume you won't be reimbursing travel expenses." Ferdinand, disoriented, heard his lips whisper, "No, no." The official signed the document and handed it to him. "Technically, you're expected to depart tomorrow, but I don't think that's critical. Let the paint on your last canvas dry in peace. If you need another day or two to settle things, I'll take responsibility. The homeland won't suffer." Ferdinand realized it was a joke and knew he should smile. To his horror, he felt his lips politely curve. "Say something, don't just stand there like a stump," urged the voice inside him. At last he managed. "The summons is sufficient. I don't need a passport." "No, no," the official replied with a smile. "There'll be no trouble at the border. Besides, you've already been reported. So then, safe travels." He extended his hand. Ferdinand understood it was time to leave. His vision darkened, and he hurried toward the door, choking on disgust. "To the right, please, to the right," came a voice behind him. He'd chosen the wrong door, and the official, with a faint smile, or so it seemed to his fog mind, opened the exit for him. Thank you. Please don't trouble yourself," he mumbled, appalled by his own excessive politeness. Outside, as the attendant handed him his gloves and cane, he remembered financial obligations to be noted officially. He had never felt such shame. He had even politely thanked them, but the outrage had already faded. Pale, he descended the stairs, and it felt as though he wasn't walking. Some unknown, merciless force was leading him, the same force that had subdued the entire world. Late that evening, he returned home. His legs buckled. For hours he had wandered aimlessly, passing his own house 3 times, unable to bring himself to enter. At last, he tried to sneak in through the vineyards along a hidden path, but the faithful dog spotted him, rushed forward barking, then nuzzled him affectionately. His wife stood at the door, and with one glance he knew she understood everything. Silently, he followed her, crushed by shame. But she was not cruel. She didn't look at him, try not to cause pain. She placed cold meat on the table, and, when he sat down obediently, came to him. "Ferdinand," she began, her voice trembling, "you're ill. You're not yourself. I won't reproach you. You're not acting of your own will, and I see how you suffer. But promise me you won't make a single decision without me." He said nothing. Her voice grew tense. "I've never interfered in your affairs. I was proud that you made your own choices. But now it's not just your life at stake. It's mine too. We've spent years building our happiness, and I won't surrender it. To the state, to the slaughterhouse, to your vanity or your weakness. To no one, do you hear? No one. If you're powerless, I'm strong. I know where this is heading, and I won't give in." He still said nothing, and his submissive, guilty silence only fueled her anger. "I won't yield to this scrap of paper. I don't recognize a law that demands murder. I won't let its servants bend me into submission. You men are all infected with ideologies, politics, ethics. But we women, we still feel. I know what a homeland is, but I also know what it's become, a center of violence and slavery. You can belong to a people, but if that people is gripped by madness, you don't have to go mad with them. If to them you're just a number, a tool, cannon fodder, I still see a living man in you. And I won't give you up. I've never claimed authority over you, but now I see it as my duty to protect you. You were once a rational, mature, strong-willed man, and now you're a broken machine of duty, like millions of others. They've taken hold of your nerves, but they've forgotten about me. I've never been stronger than I am now. He remained silent, lost in thought. He had no strength left, not to fight them, nor to resist her. She straightened, as if preparing for battle. Her voice came sharp and tense. "What did they tell you at the consulate? I want to know." There was a challenge in her tone. Exhausted, he pulled out the paper and handed it to her in silence. She read it, brows furrowed, jaw clenched, then tossed it onto the table with contempt. "So they're in a hurry, these gentlemen, tomorrow already, and you probably thanked them," bowed politely. "Report tomorrow." "Report. More precisely, become a slave." "No, we haven't reached that point yet, and we won't." Ferdinand rose. He was pale. His hand clenched the back of the chair. "Paula, let's not deceive ourselves. We've already reached it. You can't change who you are. I tried to resist. I failed. This paper is me. Even if I tear it up, it will still possess me. Don't torment me. I wouldn't feel free here anyway. Every hour, I'd remember they're calling me, pulling me, prodding me. It'll be easier there. Even in a prison, one can feel free. A fugitive is denied that feeling. And why assume the worst? I was declared unfit the first time. Maybe they'll say the same again. Maybe they won't give me a weapon. I'm almost certain they'll assign me light duty. Why paint the worst-case scenario? Maybe it won't be so dangerous. Maybe I'll draw a light lot." But she remained unyielding. "That's not the point, Ferdinand. It's not about whether the service will be light or hard. The question is, should you serve what you despise? Should you take part in the most monstrous crime of the century? Whoever doesn't resist becomes complicit. And you can resist. You must. Can I? I can't do anything. Nothing. Everything that gave me strength, my disgust, my hatred, my outrage against this madness, now crushes me. Don't torment me. I beg you, don't say these things. It's not me saying them. You must say it to yourself. They have no right to violate human life. Right? What right? Is there such a thing anymore? People have destroyed it. Each person may have a right, individually, but they have power, and that's all that matters now. And who gave them that power? You did. They hold it only because you remain cowards. Everything that fills the world with horror rests on the will of a dozen men, and another dozen could stop it. One person, one living person who refuses to recognize them, can shatter that power. But as long as you bend your back and whisper, "Maybe I'll get lucky," as long as you squirm, trying to slip through instead of striking at the heart, you are slaves. And you deserve no better. You can't hide and still keep your dignity. You must say no. That is the only duty now. Not to let yourself be slaughtered. But Paula, you would allow me to say no, if your inner voice tells you to. I love your life, your freedom, your work. And if you say to me, I must take up arms to defend a just cause, I'll say go. But if you go for a lie you don't believe in, if you go out of weakness, out of frayed nerves, hoping to slip through, I'll say I despise you. Yes, despise. If you go as a man of dignity to fight for humanity you believe in, I won't stop you. But if you go to be a beast among beasts, a slave among slaves, I won't allow it. You can sacrifice yourself for an idea, but not for someone else's madness. Let those who believe in their homeland die for it. Paula, he cried involuntarily, what is my speech too free? Do you already feel the stick of discipline at your back? Don't be afraid. You're still in Switzerland. You want me to be silent or say, nothing will happen to you. But now is not the time for comfort. Everything is at stake, your life and mine. Paula, he tried again to stop her. I have no pity left. I chose you and loved you as a free man. But I despise those who lie to themselves. Who should I pity? What am I to you? A sergeant scribbled a note, and you're ready to abandon me and run at his call. But I won't let you go just to have you come back later. Decide now, them or me. Contempt for them, or for me. I understand we'll have to endure much. I may never see my parents, my sisters, my brothers again. The way back is closed. But I'm ready for that, if you stay with me. And if you break with me now, it will be forever. A groan escaped his chest, but she burned with unstoppable fury. It's him or me. There's no other choice. Ferdinand, wake up before it's too late. I used to grieve that we had no child, but now I'm glad. I don't want to bear a child from a man who's lost his will. I won't raise a war orphan. Never have you been so close to me as now, in this moment when I'm hurting you. But I say, there will be no temporary separation. If you leave me to join the ranks of those uniformed killers, there will be no return. I won't be an accomplice to criminals. I won't surrender a living man to this state-sponsored vampire. Him or me choose. Paula left, slamming the door. Ferdinand flinched at the sharp sound. Then he slowly sank into a chair, his gaze lowered in helplessness. His head dropped wearily onto his fists. At last, a muffled sob escaped his chest. He cried like a child. She didn't return after lunch, but he felt her presence behind the door, unyielding, cold, resisting. At the same time, another force stirred within him, driving him forward like a steel cog, relentlessly turning. At times he tried to sort through his thoughts, to make sense of himself, but they slipped away, and while he sat motionless, as if in reflection, the last remnants of composure turned into burning nervous agitation. It felt as though unknown forces had pulled the thread of his life taut from both ends, and all he wanted was for it to snap. Trying to distract himself, he rummaged through drawers, tore up old letters, read others without grasping a word, paced the room, sat again, driven by anxiety, then exhaustion. Suddenly, he caught himself packing essential travel items into a bag he'd pulled from under the sofa. He stared in disbelief at his hands, which moved with precision and purpose, as if without his consent. Startled, he noticed the bag already standing on the table, and it felt as though its weight was already pressing on his shoulders, along with the full burden of modernity. The door opened. His wife entered with a kerosene lamp and placed it on the table. In the trembling circle of light stood the very bag. In the harsh illumination, its hidden shame emerged from the shadows. He mumbled, "It's just in case. I still have time." But her gaze, fixed stone-like, as if concealing something, swallowed his words and crushed them. For several minutes, she stared at him, lips tightly pressed in fury. She stood, swaying slightly like someone on the verge of fainting, and studied him. The tense line around her mouth slowly softened. She turned away, her shoulders trembled, and without looking back, she left. A few minutes later, the maid entered with dinner, for him alone. The seat beside him remained empty, and when he glanced toward it in confusion, he saw, in her chair, like a cruel symbol, lay the travel bag. It felt as though he had already left, vanished, died to this house. Beyond the lamp's circle of light, the walls loomed dark, and outside, in the shimmer of distant lights, the southern night swayed in the wind. Everything around him sank into silence. The endless sky hung over the low earth, deepening his sense of solitude. He felt everything falling away. Home, surroundings, work, wife, the once wide, full life now shrank and pressed heavily on his heart. A longing for love, for a kind word, overwhelmed him. He was ready to surrender to any argument, if only it could bring him back to the past. A deep sadness overtook his anxiety, and the great feeling of separation faded before a childlike hunger for tenderness. He approached the door and touched the handle. It didn't budge. The door was locked. He knocked timidly. No answer. He knocked again. His heartbeat matched the rhythm. Silence. He understood. All was lost. A chill pierced him. He turned off the light, threw himself onto the couch without undressing, wrapped himself in a blanket, craving darkness, oblivion. Then he listened again. Footsteps. He stared at the door, tense. It remained still. Nothing. His head sank in defeat. Suddenly, he felt a gentle touch from below. He jumped, startled, then calm, deeply moved. The dog, who had slipped in with the maid and lay beneath the couch, pressed against him and licked his hand with a warm tongue. The unconscious love of the animal filled his soul with warmth. She had come from the dying world, the last greeting from his former life. He bent down and embraced the dog like a human. Someone on this earth still loves me, doesn't despise me, he thought. To her, I'm not a machine, not a weapon, not a creature without will, but a man bound to her by affection. He kept stroking her soft fur. The dog pressed closer, as if she understood how alone he was. They both breathed quietly, slowly drifting into sleep. Upon waking, he felt slightly more refreshed. Outside, the morning was bright. The southern wind had swept away the remnants of gloom, and beyond the lake, a chain of distant mountains shimmered with a white fringe. Ferdinand jumped up, still under the spell of sleep, and only fully came to himself when his eyes fell on the packed travel bag. The thoughts that had weighed heavily on him the day before surged back, but now, in daylight, they seemed lighter. Why did I pack all this? He asked himself. Why? I'm not planning to leave. Spring is coming. I want to paint. It's not urgent. He said himself, the matter can wait. Even an animal doesn't rush to the slaughterhouse. Paula is right. This is a crime. Against her, against me, against everyone. What do they do to me? Delay me a couple of weeks if I'm late. But isn't service just another kind of prison? I'm not burning with civic zeal. In this age of slavery, disobedience is already a virtue. I'm not leaving. I'm staying. I'll paint the landscape where I was happy. And until the painting is framed, I won't go. I won't let myself be herded like cattle. There's no need to rush. He grabbed the bag, lifted it high, and hurled it into the corner. The gesture gave him pleasure. It felt like a declaration of resolve. Renewed energy demanded release. He pulled the summons from his wallet, ready to tear it apart. But strangely, the military words, as if enchanted, regained their power over him. He began to read, "You are requested," and his breath caught. It wasn't a request, but a command, allowing no objection. His knees buckled. That unknown feeling rose again inside him. His hands trembled. His strength vanished. A chill crept in like a draft. Unease spread through his body. The steel mechanism of another's will began to turn again, stretching his nerves to the limit. He glanced at the clock involuntarily. There's still time, he murmured, no longer sure what the words referred to. The morning train or the delay he had granted himself. But it already possessed him, that mysterious inner pull, like a tide drawing everything away. It gripped him more strongly than before, threatening to break his last resistance. And with it came fear, a helpless, animal fear of falling. He knew, if no one stopped him now, he would be lost. He went to Paula's door and listened hungrily. Not the slightest movement. He knocked timidly. Silence. He pressed the handle gently. The door wasn't locked, but the room was empty. The bed unmade. He panicked. Softly he called her name. No answer. He repeated it, now with urgency. Paula, then louder, louder still, like a man under attack. Paula, Paula, Paula. No movement. He reached the kitchen. No one there. A wave of disoriented terror swept over him. His body shook. He climbed to the studio, not knowing why, to say goodbye or hoping to be stopped. But it too was empty. Even a faithful dog was gone. Everything had abandoned him. Loneliness seized him again with fury and broke him completely. He walked through the empty house back to his room, grabbed the bag. He felt a strange relief, as if, by surrendering to compulsion, he was freed from the torment of choice. It's her fault, he thought. Only hers. Why did she leave? She should have stopped me. That was her duty. She could have saved me from myself, but she chose not to. She despises me. Her love is gone. She wants me to fall, and I'm falling. My blood is on her conscience. Her fault, not mine. Hers. Once more, as he stepped out of the house, he turned back, hoping someone might call out, speak a kind word, shatter with bare fists the iron machine of submission that had locked him from within. Silence. No voice. No one appeared. Everything had abandoned him, and he already saw himself falling into a bottomless abyss. A thought struck him. What if he took 10 more steps toward the lake and leapt from the bridge into that realm of eternal peace? From the church tower came the heavy toll of the bell. From the clear sky, once unspeakably beloved, fell this sharp summons, lashing him like a whip. 10 minutes remained. The train would arrive, and everything would be decided, irreversibly, forever. 10 more minutes of freedom. But he no longer felt free. As if fleeing pursuit, he rushed forward, stumbling, gasping, running faster and faster until, near the platform barrier, he collided with someone. He recoiled. The bag slipped from his trembling hand. Before him stood Paula, pale from a sleepless night, her gaze sorrowful and piercing. I knew you'd come. I've known it for 3 days. But I'm not leaving you. I've been here since the first train this morning, and I'll wait until the last. As long as I breathe, they won't take you. Ferdinand, wake up. You said yourself there's still time. Why are you rushing? He looked at her timidly. Because they've already been notified they're expecting me. And what awaits you? Slavery. Perhaps death. Nothing more. Wake up, Ferdinand. Feel your freedom. No one has power over you. No one has the right to command you. Do you hear me? You are free, free, free. I'll repeat it 1,000 times, every hour, every minute, until you believe it yourself. You are free. Please, he whispered, noticing 2 peasants turning curiously. Don't speak so loudly. People are watching. People? People, she cried in fury. What do I care about them? What will they give me if you're killed or come back crippled? I spit on their sympathy, their love, their gratitude. I want to see you alive, a free man. Free, as a human being should be, not cannon fodder. Paula, he tried to calm her, but she pushed him away. Spare me your pitiful fear. I'm in a free country. I have the right to say what I think. I'm not a slave, and I won't give you to slavery. Ferdinand, if you leave, I'll throw myself under the train. Paula, he grabbed her hand, but her face darkened. No, she continued, I won't lie. Maybe I won't have the courage. Millions of women lack the courage to do what they should have when their husbands and sons were taken away. What will I do when you're gone? Cry, pray, beg God to give you light duty. Maybe even condemn those who refuse to go. Anything is possible in times like these. Paula, he squeezed her hands. Why are you hurting me so much if nothing can be changed? You want me to make it easier for you to leave? No. Let it be hard, unbearably hard, so that it becomes impossible. Here I am. Push me aside. Trample me if you must. I won't let you go. The signal sounded. He flinched, turned pale, reached for the bag. But she grabbed it first and stood in his path. Give it to me, he groaned. Never, never, she screamed, locking into a desperate struggle. The peasants gathered around, laughing. Jeers flew. Children abandoned their games and ran to watch. They fought over the bag with such fury, as if life itself hung in the balance. At that moment, the train whistle blew. He let go of the bag, dashed toward the train, stumbling over the tracks, not looking back, and leapt into the carriage. Around him rose loud laughter. Peasants shouted gleefully, "Run, jump, hurry, or she'll catch you." And the crackling laughter lashed him, flushing his face with shame. The train sped away. She remained standing, clutching the bag tightly, showered with mockery, her eyes fixed on the vanishing train. No farewell, no glance from a window. Tears burst from her eyes and blurred her vision. He sat huddled in the corner, unable even to glance out the window of the speeding train. Out there, beyond the glass, everything he held dear was being torn to shreds. The cottage on the hill with his paintings, the table, the chair, the bed, his wife, his dog, the happiness of countless lived days. And the landscape, whose gleaming expanse he had once savored, now receded into the distance. Along with it went his freedom and his entire life. It felt as though the threads of fate had snapped. Nothing belonged to him anymore, except for that white sheet of paper rustling in his pocket, propelling him forward, driven by the will of some foreign, malevolent force. He perceived the world around him dimly, disjointedly. The conductor asked for his ticket. It was missing. As if in a dream, he named the station, mechanically switched carriages. Everything happened outside of him. The inner mechanism operated without his awareness, and it no longer caused pain. At the Swiss border, they asked for documents. He presented them. Only that pitiful slip remained. A memory stirred quietly in the depths, and a voice, like from a dream, whispered, "Go back. You're still free. You don't have to go." But the mechanism, set in motion in his blood, had silently and powerfully taken hold of his nerves and body, relentlessly pushing him forward, repeating, "You must." He stood on the platform of the station bordering his homeland. On the other side, in the pale daylight, he could clearly see the bridge spanning the river, the border. A weary thought tried to focus on that word. On this side, one could still live, breathe, speak freely, act with will, serve a true cause. But just 800 steps beyond the bridge, will is torn from a man like entrails from a body, and all that remains is blind obedience to foreign orders, the plunging of knives into other people's chests. And all of it because of that tiny bridge, that pitiful 100 beams and 2 spans. And 2 men, both in absurd, garish uniforms, stood with rifles guarding it. Something vague disturbed him. He was aware of the haziness of his thoughts, but they flowed on. Why guard that pile of wood? So no one escapes from the country where will is enslaved. But wasn't he heading there himself? Yes, but in another sense, from freedom into... He faltered. One thought hypnotized him. The border. Well, he saw it before him, real, guarded by 2 bored soldiers. His mind ceased to function clearly. He tried to reconstruct the picture. There's a war. But the war is on the other side of the bridge. 1 kilometer minus 200 meters away, the war begins. Or maybe 10 meters closer. So 1,800 meters minus 10. He suddenly had a mad urge to find out. Does the war begin on those 10 meters of land or not? The absurdity of the thought even amused him. There must be a dividing line somewhere. And if he stepped to the border, placed one foot on the bridge and the other on the ground, what then? Was he free or already a soldier? One foot civilian, the other military. His thoughts grew increasingly childish. What if he stood on the bridge and then ran back? Would that be considered desertion? And the water, was it on military or peaceful territory? Was there a stripe of national colors on the riverbed? And the fish, did they have the right to swim into the warring country? And what about animals? He thought of his dog. If she had followed him, she'd probably have been mobilized too, harnessed to a cannon cart or forced to search for wounded men under a rain of bullets. Thank God she stayed home. Thank God. The thought startled him, and he shuddered. From a moment the border appeared before him, that bridge between life and death. Something stirred inside. Sparks of awareness and resistance flickered to life. On the tracks behind him still stood the train that had brought him here. The locomotive, turned around, stared back with its great glass eyes, ready to carry the wagons back to Switzerland. It was a sign. Time had not yet run out. He felt, with aching clarity, the nerve of longing for his lost home begin to speak again, and the man he once was began to awaken. On the far side of the bridge, he saw a soldier in a foreign uniform, a heavy rifle slung over his shoulder, pacing back and forth without purpose. And suddenly he saw himself in that figure. Only now did he truly grasp his fate, and in grasping it he saw his ruin, and the voice of life spoke within him. The signal bells rang out, their sharp clang drowning the still-forming voice inside. He knew, if he boarded the train, traveled those 2 kilometers, everything would be lost. Irrevocably. And yet he knew he would go. And still another 15 minutes, and he might be saved. His knees buckled, but the train was not approaching from the direction he was watching. Its slow rhythm came from the opposite side of the bridge. The platform stirred to life. People gathered from all directions. Women pushed forward in noisy excitement. Swiss soldiers lined up in formation. And suddenly music began to play. He listened, disbelieving. The notes of the Marseillaise rang out, strong and clear. A hostile anthem for the arrival of a German train. The train thundered in, puffed, and came to a halt. Everyone surged forward. The carriage doors flung open, revealing pale faces lit with feverish gleams and shining eyes. French soldiers in uniform, wounded Frenchmen, enemies. It all felt like a dream until he understood. The train had brought wounded prisoners for exchange. Here, freedom, salvation from the madness of war. And they all felt it, knew it, lived it. How they bowed, called out, laughed. Though for many, laughter brought pain. One, staggering on crutches, stopped by a post and cried out, La Suisse, La Suisse. Dieu soit béni. Women, weeping, ran from window to window until they found the long-awaited, the beloved. Voices merged into calls, sobs, cries, everything drowned in jubilation. The music faded. For a few moments, only the surf of exultant feeling could be heard, rolling over the heads of the crowd. Gradually, the scene settled. Groups dispersed, united by quiet joy and hurried conversation. A few women still wandered the platform in search. Nurses handed out food and gifts. The gravely ill were carried out on stretchers, pale, wrapped in white sheets, surrounded by care and tenderness. and the full abyss of human suffering was laid bare, mutilated with empty sleeves, emaciated and burned, remnants of a youth gone wild and aged too soon. But their eyes, shining calmly, were turned toward the sky. All of them felt the pilgrimage was over. Ferdinand stood, stunned by the unexpected spectacle. His heart beat wildly again, beneath the rustling paper in his pocket. Off to the side, alone, unclaimed amid the joy of others, lay a stretcher. He approached it with hesitant steps, toward the one forgotten in the midst of celebration. The wounded man's face glowed with pallor, overgrown with an unkempt beard. His shot-through arm hung limp. His eyes were closed, his lips pale. Ferdinand trembled. Gently, he lifted the dangling arm and laid it tenderly across the sufferer's chest. And the stranger opened his eyes, looked at him, and from the boundless distance of unknown suffering, a grateful smile greeted him. And as if struck by lightning, he shuddered. Could he truly be capable of this? To humiliate another human being, to look with hatred upon his own brothers, to willingly take part in a great crime? A powerful awareness of truth surged through him, shattering the inner mechanism of submission. The thirst for freedom triumphed, filled him with bliss, and annihilated blind obedience. And a mighty voice, long buried within, rang out, "Never! Never!" It was beyond his strength. He collapsed beside the stretcher, sobbing. People rushed to him, thinking he was having a nervous breakdown. A doctor arrived, but he rose slowly, refusing help. His face was calm. He took out his wallet, withdrew his last money, and placed it on the wounded man's bed. Then he took the paper, read it one last time, slowly, deliberately. Then he tore it apart and scattered the fragments across the platform. People stared at him as if he were mad. But he no longer felt shame, only the lightness of healing. The music resumed, but louder than its notes was the jubilant beat of his heart. Late that evening, he returned home. Inside, it was dark, somber like a tomb. He knocked. Footsteps approached, and his wife opened the door. Seeing him, she froze in fear. But he gently took her hand and led her into the room. They said nothing. Both trembled with joy. He entered his room. His paintings were there. She had brought them from the studio to be closer to him among his creations. In that gesture, he felt boundless love and understood how much he had preserved. Silently, he pressed her hand. From the kitchen, the dog ran in, leapt up, and threw herself at him. They had all been waiting. He realized that he had never truly left this home, and yet it felt as if he had risen from the dead. They remained silent. She gently took his hand and led him to the window. The beautiful world shimmered beneath the endless sky, strewn with stars. The suffering wrought by humanity's madness could not disturb the peace of the cosmos. And as he gazed upward, he understood. There is no law for man on earth but the one created by her, by the earth itself. Only the law of love binds human beings. On his lips, he felt his wife's breath, and a gentle shiver passed through their bodies from the sweetness of closeness. They remained silent. Their hearts soared into infinite freedom, casting off the weight of human laws and words. Ladies and gentlemen, subscribe to the channel to stay connected. Share your impressions and thoughts in the comments. I'd be delighted to hear from you and continue the conversation.